The television flickered, displaying images of distant suffering, a natural disaster, a community in distress. Maria felt a familiar ache bloom in her chest, a profound heaviness that seemed to pull her down, as if the pain on the screen were her own. She began to obsess over the news, losing sleep, her own life overshadowed by the collective anguish of strangers. This profound exaggerated empathy, this almost porous emotional boundary, can turn compassion into a consuming burden. We absorb the sorrow of the world, the anxieties of our loved ones, the silent struggles of those around us until their pain becomes indistinguishable from our own. It's a silent, relentless emotional sponging, leaving us depleted, overwhelmed, and struggling to breathe beneath the weight of shared suffering. This immense capacity to carry collective burdens echoes through the cacophonous, crowded shores of a unique marine giant. Imagine the elephant seal, a colossal creature living in massive, tumultuous colonies. These animals are in constant, close proximity, their lives interwoven with the raw, brutal realities of their group. Fierce battles, the vulnerability of pups, the exhaustion of constant survival. They appear to carry collective burdens, absorbing the chaotic energy, the intense physicality, and the inherent suffering of their immense group through sheer physical and emotional immersion. But what happens when the human capacity for empathy becomes an unmanaged flood? When the noble act of compassion turns into a self-destructive immersion in pain? Can we truly help others when we are drowning in their sorrows, perpetually absorbing the suffering of the group until our own light dims? Sarah worked as a therapist, and by the end of each day, her mind buzzed with the echoes of her clients' anxieties, traumas, and heartbreaks. She'd replay their stories, feeling their tears welling in her own eyes, their fear tightening her own stomach. Even after work, a casual conversation with a friend about their difficult day left Sarah feeling utterly drained, almost physically ill. This pervasive empathic overload wasn't just tiredness. It was a profound saturation of her emotional system, an inability to filter or compartmentalize the torrent of feelings she encountered. She longed for emotional resilience, for the capacity to help without being consumed, but the ingrained habit of deep, unfiltered absorption left her perpetually exhausted, her inner world a chaotic echo chamber of others' pain, unable to find stillness from the constant emotional noise. This pervasive empathic overload, a profound saturation by the emotional environment, finds a compelling parallel in the elephant seal's sensory barrage within its tumultuous colony. Elephant seals gather in massive, dense rookeries, especially during breeding season. The beach becomes a chaotic, overwhelming sensory environment. The constant roaring of dominant males, the frantic movements of hundreds of animals, the sharp cries of pups, the constant jostling for space, and the raw sounds of intense, sometimes brutal interactions. These animals are immersed in a continuous, high-intensity social and physical landscape. They absorb this sensory barrage through constant proximity, noise, and the sheer scale of the collective, living in an environment where individual boundaries are almost non-existent. For the elephant seal, this constant, overwhelming input is a fundamental aspect of its communal existence, a necessary, yet inherently draining, immersion in the relentless activity of the group. The human experience of empathic overload directly mirrors the elephant seal's sensory barrage. In human neurobiology, excessive empathy can lead to mirror neuron system overactivation, where the brain literally mirrors the observed emotions of others, coupled with a highly permeable limbic system, emotion processing, and a dysregulated stress response when boundaries are weak. This can result in compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma. Psychologically, empathic overload often stems from a deep desire to help, a blurring of self-other boundaries, or a learned pattern of hyper-responsiveness to others' distress. Evolutionary psychology suggests that empathy and social attunement were adaptive for group cohesion and survival. However, when it becomes overwhelming, it leads to burnout, anxiety, depression, and a profound inability to maintain one's own emotional well-being. Just as the elephant seal is perpetually immersed in the chaotic energy of its colony, a person experiencing empathic overload lives with a constant, overwhelming influx of others' emotions, unable to filter or protect their inner landscape. Sarah felt the suffocating weight of her own empathic overload, the exhaustion that permeated her very being. She was confronting the immense personal cost of this pervasive absorption, the clarity it clouded, and the personal energy it drained. Would she continue to live as an open emotional conduit, perpetually saturated by the world's pain, forever feeling the weight of others as her own? Or would she, like an elephant seal that eventually retreats to the ocean to feed and recover, dare to establish healthier emotional boundaries, to create space for her own healing, risking the discomfort of perceived detachment for the sake of her own well-being? Her instinct was to absorb, to feel, to connect deeply. But the profound exhaustion, the yearning for genuine resilience, now demanded a different, more courageous choice. She had to acknowledge that her compassion was not just helping others, but also slowly consuming her. The elephant seal, sensory barrage, and its immersion in collective chaos offer a powerful metaphor for the human struggle with empathic overload. It teaches us that while deep empathy is a profound human gift, an unchecked capacity to absorb others' emotions can lead to profound exhaustion, emotional saturation, and a diminished ability to truly help. By understanding the primal immersion that defines the elephant seal's communal life, we are invited to confront the origins and costs of our own porous emotional boundaries. May we learn from the elephant seal to discern when our empathy is connecting us and when it is becoming a consuming burden, and to understand that true compassion lies not in absorbing all pain, but in the wisdom to set boundaries, to replenish our own emotional reserves, and to help from a place of strength rather than becoming lost in the collective suffering. Liam walked into his family gathering, and within minutes, he felt the familiar pull. His sister's anxiety over her job, his brother's simmering resentment about old grievances, his mother's unspoken worries about finances. He felt each emotion as if it were his own, the weight settling onto his shoulders. He didn't just understand their feelings. He seemed to absorb them, becoming a vessel for the unspoken emotional currents in the room. This pervasive emotional sponging wasn't just empathy. It was a subconscious mirroring, a blurring of his own emotional state with that of the group. He longed for emotional clarity, for the ability to distinguish his feelings from others. But the ingrained habit of taking on collective burdens left him feeling heavy, confused, and drained, perpetually burdened by a weight that wasn't truly his, unable to shed the invisible cloak of others' emotions. This pervasive emotional sponging, this profound capacity to absorb the emotional states of the group, finds a compelling parallel in the elephant seal's group cohesion and its physical proximity. Elephant seals live in incredibly dense colonies where individual space is minimum, particularly during mating season. Males constantly assert dominance through roars and physical clashes, while females and pups huddle together for safety and warmth. The constant physical contact and close quarters mean that the collective experience, be it the stress of a dominant male, as presence, the vulnerability of pups, or the general tension of competition, is palpable and absorbed by every individual in the mass. This intense group cohesion, built on close physical and energetic proximity, means that each animal is constantly sponging the immediate reality of the collective, living within the shared physical and emotional intensity of the rookery, with little respite from the constant energetic exchange. The human experience of emotional sponging directly mirrors the elephant seal's group cohesion. In human neurobiology, emotional sponging can be linked to highly active mirror neuron systems and an over-identification with others' emotional states, often leading to a sympathetic nervous system response, even when direct threat is absent. It can stem from a deep, often unconscious, desire to belong or to maintain group harmony, believing that absorbing others' pain is a way to connect or alleviate their suffering. Psychologically, it often develops in environments where individuals were conditioned to be hyper-attuned to others' emotions for safety or approval. Evolutionary psychology suggests that this deep attunement to group emotions was adaptive for maintaining social bonds and sensing collective threats. However, when it becomes chronic, it leads to compassion fatigue, emotional exhaustion, identity confusion, and difficulty asserting personal boundaries, as one's own emotional landscape becomes constantly contaminated by others' feelings. Just as the elephant seal lives in constant physical and energetic exchange with its colony, a person engaged in emotional sponging perpetually absorbs the emotional states of their group, struggling to define their own feelings. Liam felt the suffocating weight of his own emotional sponging, the profound confusion that arose from carrying so many disparate feelings. He was confronting the immense personal cost of this pervasive absorption, the clarity it clouded and the self-identity it obscured. Would he continue to live as an emotional echo chamber, perpetually taking on the emotional burdens of his loved ones, forever struggling to distinguish his own feelings from theirs? Or would he, like an elephant seal that, when it finally disperses to sea, find solitude and distinct identity, dare to consciously create emotional space, to practice discernment, to return others' emotions to them, risking the discomfort of perceived detachment for the sake of his own emotional well-being? His instinct was to feel deeply, to connect, to carry. But the profound exhaustion, the yearning for genuine self-clarity, now demanded a different, more courageous choice. He had to acknowledge that his empathy was not just making him connected, but also slowly dissolving him. The elephant seal's group cohesion and its physical and energetic immersion offer a powerful metaphor for the human struggle with emotional sponging. It teaches us that while deep connection and empathy are vital, an unchecked capacity to absorb others' emotional states can lead to profound emotional confusion, exhaustion, and a diminished sense of self. By understanding the primal closeness that defines the elephant seal's communal life, we are invited to confront the origins and costs of our own porous emotional boundaries. May we learn from the elephant seal to discern when our connection is healthy and when it is becoming a self-dissolving burden, and to understand that true connection lies not in absorbing all emotion, but in the wisdom to distinguish and honor our own emotional landscape, offering compassion from a place of clear, defined selfhood, rather than becoming lost in the collective emotional currents. Chloe worked in a high-stress environment, constantly exposed to stories of hardship and injustice. Initially, she felt a burning desire to help, to make a difference. But over time, a numbness began to creep in. She found herself growing cynical, her emotional responses dulled, her initial passion replaced by a heavy weariness. The suffering of others, once a source of motivation, now felt like an endless, overwhelming tide that she could no longer face. This pervasive compassion fatigue wasn't a lack of caring. It was a profound emotional depletion, a desensitization born from prolonged exposure to pain without adequate recovery. She longed to rekindle her passion, to feel the spark of empathy again, but the ingrained habit of pushing through emotional exhaustion left her feeling empty, hollowed out, perpetually shielded by a layer of apathy, a silent casualty of her own immense caring. This pervasive compassion fatigue, a profound emotional depletion from prolonged exposure to suffering, finds a stark parallel in the elephant seal's sustained stress within its harsh, competitive environment. Life in an elephant seal colony is a constant struggle for survival and reproduction. Males engage in brutal, exhausting fights for dominance, often suffering severe wounds. Females endure the intense demands of birthing and nursing pups in a crowded, high-stress environment, often without adequate food or rest. Pups face high mortality rates due to crushing, starvation, or predation. These animals are under sustained stress for prolonged periods, both physically and emotionally, operating at the very limits of their endurance. This constant, high-intensity struggle takes a toll, creating a baseline of hardship that defines their existence, pushing them to their physiological and psychological limits. The human experience of compassion fatigue directly mirrors the elephant seal's sustained stress. In human neurobiology, compassion fatigue is a form of secondary traumatic stress, leading to a chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system and dysregulation of the HPA axis stress response, resulting in emotional numbness, exhaustion, and cynicism. The prefrontal cortex executive function can become impaired, affecting decision-making and empathy. Psychologically, it stems from prolonged exposure to the emotional distress of others without sufficient self-care, boundaries, or processing. Evolutionary psychology suggests that while empathy is adaptive, prolonged exposure to collective suffering without respite can overwhelm an individual's coping mechanisms. Just as the elephant seal endures immense, sustained stress in its colony, a person experiencing compassion fatigue lives with a constant, draining burden of emotional exposure, leading to a profound sense of numbness and weariness, their capacity to care slowly eroding. Chloe felt the chilling numbness of her own compassion fatigue, the heavy cloak of apathy that had settled over her spirit. She was confronting the immense personal cost of this pervasive depletion, the vibrant passion it extinguished and the genuine joy it denied her. Would she continue to push through, perpetually absorbing the world's pain until she had nothing left to give, forever feeling hollowed out? Or would she, like an elephant seal that eventually returns to the deep ocean to replenish its massive energy reserves, dare to withdraw, to prioritize radical self-care, to seek respite from the constant influx of suffering, risking the discomfort of temporary disengagement for the sake of her own emotional and spiritual replenishment? Her instinct was to care, to give, to stay in the fight. But the profound emptiness, the yearning for renewed purpose, now demanded a different, more courageous choice. She had to acknowledge that her service was not just helping others, but also slowly destroying her. The elephant seal sustained stress and its immersion in a brutal environment offer a powerful metaphor for the human struggle with compassion fatigue. It teaches us that while empathy and service are noble, an unchecked exposure to suffering without adequate recovery can lead to profound emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and a diminished capacity for care. By understanding the primal endurance that defines the elephant seal's life of hardship, we are invited to confront the origins and costs of our own emotional depletion. May we learn from the elephant seal to discern when our dedication is sustainable and when it is becoming a self-destructive burden, and to understand that true compassion lies not in endless self-sacrifice, but in the wisdom to replenish our own reserves, to set boundaries, and to care for ourselves, allowing us to serve from a place of renewed strength and enduring purpose. Mark felt a subtle unease when his friend recounted intimate details about their troubled relationship, then immediately asked for advice on Mark's own love life. Later, his boss began sharing personal financial woes during a work meeting, blurring the line between colleague and confidant. Mark found himself absorbing these disclosures, feeling responsible, unsure where his obligations ended and theirs began. This pervasive blurred boundaries wasn't just about being a good listener. It was an unconscious entanglement, a merging of his own sense of self with the problems and emotions of others. He longed for clear distinctions for emotional space, but the ingrained habit of taking on others' burdens left him feeling overwhelmed, confused, and drained, perpetually intertwined in a web of obligations that weren't truly his, unable to disentangle himself from the emotional dramas of others. This pervasive blurred boundaries, this lack of distinct separation between self and other, finds a stark physical parallel in the elephant seal's constant physical intermingling within its dense colonies. On the breeding beaches, hundreds, even thousands, of massive elephant seals are packed tightly together. Dominant males literally roll over smaller males or females, and pups are often accidentally crushed by the sheer mass of the adults. There is virtually no concept of personal space or distinct individual boundaries in these crowded rookeries. Animals are constantly touching, bumping, and interacting in a physically overwhelming manner. This physical intermingling means that individual space is a luxury, and the experience of one animal is constantly, inescapably intertwined with the physical presence and actions of the hundreds around it, making true separation impossible. The human experience of blurred boundaries directly mirrors the elephant seal's physical intermingling. In human neurobiology, blurred boundaries can stem from a poorly developed sense of self or an overactive mirror neuron system coupled with weak inhibitory control in the prefrontal cortex, leading to a merging of one's own identity and emotions with others. It often results from early relational dynamics where personal space or autonomy was not respected, leading to a learned pattern of emotional enmeshment. Psychologically, blurred boundaries manifest as an inability to say no, taking on excessive responsibility for others' feelings, or a difficulty distinguishing one's own thoughts and feelings from those of others. Evolutionary psychology suggests that high group cohesion was adaptive. However, when boundaries are chronically blurred, it leads to resentment, identity confusion, burnout, and an inability to form healthy, independent relationships. Just as the elephant seal lives in constant physical contact with its colony, a person with blurred boundaries perpetually lacks clear distinction between self and other, leading to a chaotic and overwhelming inner and outer life. Mark felt the suffocating tangle of his own blurred boundaries, the profound confusion that arose from carrying so many disparate emotional burdens. He was confronting the immense personal cost of this pervasive entanglement, the clear identity it obscured and the personal energy it drained. Would he continue to live in this state of emotional merging, perpetually losing himself in the dramas and needs of others, forever intertwined in obligations that weren't truly his? Or would he, like an elephant seal that eventually disperses to the ocean, where it can swim freely and alone dare to define his own emotional and personal space, to say no when necessary, to distinguish his responsibilities from others, risking the discomfort of perceived distance for the sake of his own well-being and clarity? His instinct was to help, to connect, to be part of the solution. But the profound exhaustion, the yearning for genuine autonomy, now demanded a different, more courageous choice. He had to acknowledge that his empathy was not just connecting him, but also slowly dissolving him. The elephant seal's physical intermingling and its lack of individual space offer a powerful metaphor for the human struggle with blurred boundaries. It teaches us that while connection is vital, an unchecked habit of merging one's emotional and personal space with others can lead to profound confusion, depletion, and a diminished sense of self. By understanding the primal physical closeness that defines the elephant seal's communal life, we are invited to confront the origins and costs of our own porous boundaries. May we learn from the elephant seal to discern when our closeness is healthy and when it is becoming a self-erasing entanglement, and to understand that true connection lies not in merging with others, but in the wisdom to maintain a clear sense of self, establishing healthy boundaries that allow for genuine intimacy built on respect for individual integrity rather than enmeshment. Thomas felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. News of global conflicts, the struggles of marginalized communities, the systemic injustices discussed online. He absorbed it all, internalizing the suffering of distant populations as if it were his own immediate burden. He felt a deep, almost physical pain, a sense of guilt for his own comforts, and a relentless urge to somehow alleviate the immense suffering he witnessed, even when it was beyond his individual capacity. This pervasive carrying of collective pain wasn't just awareness. It was a profound, self-imposed burden, a taking on of the suffering of the larger human group. He longed for a sense of individual peace, for a clear delineation between his responsibilities and the world's immense problems. But the ingrained habit of absorbing global anguish left him feeling overwhelmed, helpless, and perpetually burdened by an impossible task, unable to find respite from the shared sorrow of humanity. This pervasive carrying of collective pain, this profound absorption of the group's suffering, finds a dramatic parallel in the elephant seal's immense group burden. Elephant seal colonies are not just crowded. They are often brutal environments where individual suffering contributes to the overall intensity. Pups are sometimes accidentally crushed by large males. Fights are constant and bloody, and survival is a daily struggle against harsh elements and intense competition. Each individual in the colony, simply by existing within it, is exposed to and implicitly carries the intense physical and emotional toll of the group's relentless battle for survival. The loud roars, the constant jostling, the visible injuries, all contribute to a group burden that is shared and experienced by every member. A constant reminder of the raw, often painful, realities of their collective existence. The human experience of carrying collective pain directly mirrors the elephant seal's group burden. In human neurobiology, this phenomenon can lead to secondary trauma or vicarious trauma, where the brain responds to observed suffering as if it were personally experienced, leading to chronic stress, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. It often stems from a high capacity for empathy, coupled with a belief that one must internalize collective suffering to truly care or be a compassionate person. Psychologically, it can manifest as a heightened sense of responsibility for global issues, a guilt about one's own privilege, or a tendency to focus on negative news and social problems to the exclusion of personal well-being. Evolutionary psychology suggests that a strong empathic response to group suffering could motivate collective action. However, when it becomes chronic and unmanaged, it leads to burnout, helplessness, severe anxiety, and a profound inability to experience joy or personal peace, as the individual is constantly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of global suffering. Just as the elephant seal lives under the constant burden of its colony's inherent struggles, a person carrying collective pain perpetually absorbs the immense suffering of the larger human group, finding no escape from its pervasive weight. Thomas felt the crushing weight of his own collective pain, the profound sense of helplessness that accompanied his absorption of global suffering. He was confronting the immense personal cost of this pervasive burden, the personal peace it obliterated, and the individual joy it denied him. Would he continue to live as a vessel for the world's pain, perpetually overwhelmed by problems beyond his control, forever feeling guilty for any personal happiness? Or would he, like an elephant seal that, despite its collective life, disperses to the vast, solitary ocean to feed and recover, dare to define his own sphere of influence, to acknowledge suffering without internalizing it, to release the burden of the impossible, risking the discomfort of perceived indifference for the sake of his own peace and effectiveness? His instinct was to care, to engage, to absorb. But the profound exhaustion, the yearning for genuine hope, now demanded a different, more courageous choice. He had to acknowledge that his compassion was not just making him aware, but also slowly crushing him. The elephant seal, its immense group burden, and its immersion in collective struggle offer a powerful metaphor for the human struggle with carrying collective pain. It teaches us that while empathy for the world's suffering is a noble human trait, an unchecked compulsion to internalize and carry all collective anguish can lead to profound burnout, helplessness, and a diminished capacity for personal well-being. By understanding the primal hardship that defines the elephant seal's communal existence, we are invited to confront the origins and costs of our own patterns of absorbing global sorrow. May we learn from the elephant seal to discern when our awareness is motivating action and when it is becoming a self-defeating burden, and to understand that true compassion lies not in absorbing all pain, but in the wisdom to find our place of healthy engagement, contributing to the world from a place of resilience and hope, rather than becoming overwhelmed by the impossible weight of collective suffering. When a friend started recounting a deeply traumatic event, Maria listened with a newfound calm. She felt compassion, yes, but also a clear distinction. This was their pain, not hers to absorb. She offered support, but gently redirected the conversation when it became overwhelming, protecting her own emotional space. This practice of healing boundaries wasn't coldness. It was a conscious act of self-preservation, a recognition that she could care deeply without merging her identity with another's suffering. She had learned to distinguish between empathy, understanding another's feelings, and emotional enmeshment, taking on those feelings as her own. She now moved through the world with a lightness she hadn't known before, able to offer genuine support without sacrificing her own well-being, finally finding a balance between connection and self-preservation, a quiet strength born from self-respect. This practice of healing boundaries, the ability to distinguish self from other, and to retreat for self-preservation, finds a powerful and essential parallel in the elephant seal's solitary foraging in the vast ocean. After the intense, tumultuous breeding season in the crowded colonies, elephant seals disperse into the open ocean. Here, they spend months diving deep, foraging alone for food, covering immense distances. This period is one of profound solitary foraging, a necessary time for individual recovery, nourishment, and physiological replenishment. Away from the constant sensory barrages, physical conflicts, and the immense social pressures of the rookery, each animal finds distinct personal space and an opportunity for individual well-being. This solitude is not isolation, but a crucial phase for rebuilding the self, allowing them to regenerate physically and mentally before returning to the demands of communal life. For the elephant seal, this individual journey is a fundamental act of self-care, a necessary re-establishment of personal integrity. The human experience of healing boundaries directly mirrors the elephant seal's solitary foraging. In human neurobiology, establishing healthy boundaries involves strengthening the prefrontal cortex, its ability to regulate emotional responses and differentiate self from other, allowing for conscious choice rather than automatic absorption. It often involves processing past experiences where boundaries were violated and developing a secure sense of self-worth independent of others' emotional states. Psychologically, it manifests as the ability to say no, to articulate one's needs, and to experience empathy without becoming overwhelmed. Evolutionary psychology suggests that while group cohesion is vital, individual autonomy and the capacity for self-regulation are equally crucial for individual and collective flourishing. Just as the elephant seal retreats to the solitary ocean to replenish itself, a person engaged in healing boundaries learns to create necessary emotional and energetic space, allowing them to recharge, clarify their own identity, and engage with others from a place of strength rather than depletion. Maria felt the quiet strength of her newly established boundaries, the sense of liberation that came from not carrying others' burdens. She was embracing the immense personal benefit of this conscious choice, the clarity it brought to her relationships, and the genuine peace it fostered within her. Would she continue to honor these boundaries, knowing they were essential for her well-being, even if it meant occasional discomfort for others or herself? Or would she, swayed by old patterns of people-pleasing, regress into the familiar chaos of blurred lines? Her instinct, once to absorb and merge, was now shifting towards discernment and protection. The profound peace, the yearning for genuine self-mastery, now demanded a new, courageous commitment. She had to acknowledge that her self-care was not just benefiting her, but also allowing her to connect more authentically and effectively with the world. The elephant seal's solitary foraging and its essential return to individual space offer a powerful and hopeful metaphor for the human journey of healing boundaries. It teaches us that while connection and empathy are vital aspects of human life, the ability to establish clear emotional and personal boundaries is crucial for maintaining our well-being and enhancing our capacity for true, sustainable compassion. By understanding the primal need for individual regeneration that drives the elephant seal to seek solitude, we are invited to embrace the importance of self-care and self-definition. May we learn from the elephant seal to discern when our giving is authentic and when it is becoming self-destructive, and to understand that true empathy thrives not in absorption, but in the wisdom to protect our inner landscape, allowing us to offer genuine support from a place of wholeness, fostering relationships that honor both self and other, and ultimately contributing more effectively to the collective good.